The rescue. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of fire and destruction. Explosions rocked the ground, sending smoke and debris into the air. Captain John Ryder crouched behind a burnt-out vehicle, gripping his rifle tightly. His breathing was heavy, his heart pounding like a drum. He had survived countless battles, but this one felt different. The enemy wasn't just relentless. They were everywhere. John peeked over the edge of his cover, scanning the area. The alien forces were known as the Drauken, a ruthless species that left no survivors. Their war machines roamed the battlefield, hunting down anyone who dared resist. John knew he was alone, cut off from his unit, but he wasn't ready to give up. As he moved carefully through the ruins, he heard a faint sound, a low guttural groan. His instincts kicked in, and he followed the noise, keeping his weapon ready. Turning a corner, he froze. There, lying in a pool of shimmering greenish blood, was an alien unlike any he had seen before. Her armor was elegant and intricate, glowing faintly with symbols that seemed alive. She was taller than the average human, her pale skin marked with delicate patterns that glimmered under the fading sunlight. Her eyes, half closed, were a piercing violet. John recognized her immediately. She was no ordinary soldier. This was Queen Syra, the ruler of the Velara, a species known for their wisdom and advanced technology. The Velara were supposed to be neutral in this war. What was she doing here? Before John could decide, he saw movement. A group of scavengers, rogue aliens armed with crude weapons, crept closer to the wounded queen. They didn't seem to notice John, their attention fully on their prey. They whispered in their guttural tongue. Their intentions clear. They were here to finish her off and claim her armor as a trophy. John's mind raced. He had no reason to intervene. Saving her would draw attention to himself, and he was barely surviving as it was. But something about her vulnerable state stirred something in him. Despite being an alien, she looked helpless. He took a deep breath and acted. Swinging his rifle up, he fired a warning shot into the air. The scavengers turned, startled, and John didn't give them time to react. He picked them off one by one with precise shots, his military training kicking in. When the last scavenger fell, silence returned to the battlefield, broken only by the crackling of distant fires. John approached the queen cautiously, his rifle still raised. Up close, she looked even more otherworldly. Her breathing was shallow, her glowing eyes flickering as she tried to focus on him. "Why did you help me?" she whispered, her voice surprisingly soft, almost musical. It sent a shiver down John's spine. "I guess I'm just a nice guy," John replied, keeping his tone steady. He wasn't sure if she understood sarcasm, but he wasn't about to explain. "Can you stand?" She shook her head weakly. "You don't understand. By saving me, you've doomed yourself." Her words caught him off guard. "What are you talking about?" Before she could answer, a shadow loomed over them. A massive Drauken war machine, its mechanical limbs creaking ominously, emerged from the smoke. Its red sensors locked onto John and the queen, its weapons charging. John's instincts screamed at him to run, but something inside him refused to leave her behind. He grabbed Syra, slinging her arm over his shoulder. "If we're doomed, we might as well go down fighting," he muttered. He sprinted toward the nearest cover, the queen's weight slowing him down. The war machine fired, its energy blasts narrowly missing them. John ducked into a crumbling building, setting Syra down behind a wall. "You're insane," she said weakly, her glowing eyes locking onto his. Despite her condition, there was a hint of admiration in her tone. "Maybe," John replied, reloading his weapon. "But I don't leave people behind, even if they're not people." The war machine's heavy footsteps grew louder as it closed in. John could feel the vibrations through the floor. He had only one grenade left, and his rifle was no match for the machine's thick armor. "Listen," Thyra said, her voice urgent despite her weakness. "I can help you, but you must trust me." John hesitated. Trust an alien queen? This day was getting stranger by the second. But he was out of options. What do you need? She raised a trembling hand, revealing a small glowing shard. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, almost alive. Take this. It will give you a chance. John took the shard, feeling a strange warmth spread through his hand. As the war machine burst through the wall, he stood up, gripping the shard tightly. He didn't know what was about to happen, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was survival, and he wasn't going down without a fight. Unlikely alliance. John leaned against the crumbling wall, catching his breath as Queen Syra sat nearby, her pale skin glowing faintly in the dim light. The battlefield outside was eerily quiet now, but John knew better. Quiet only meant something worse was coming. Syra's gaze fixed on him, her violet eyes narrowing. "You should have left me," she said softly, the faint hum of the shard in his palm vibrating through his body. John scoffed. "Yeah, I get that a lot." "You're welcome, by the way." She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, John wondered if she even understood gratitude the way humans did. Aliens had their own codes, their own rules, and John had long accepted that understanding them fully was a lost cause. But then, Syra did something unexpected. She placed her hand over her chest, bowing her head slightly. "I owe you a debt," she said solemnly. "But you must understand, saving me wasn't an act of mercy. It was a curse for you." John shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the shard. "You keep saying that. Care to explain why carrying this thing feels like I stuck my hand in a power outlet?" Syra hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "That shard is part of me," she finally said. "A fragment of my life force. When you accepted it, our fates became linked." John froze. "Linked? As in, if I die, so do you." John let out a long breath, running a hand through his dirt-streaked hair. "Great. I save an alien queen, and now I'm tied to her life. This just keeps getting better." Syra watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. "I didn't expect to survive this far," she admitted. "But now that I have, I cannot return alone. I need you to take me to my people's sanctuary. It's far from here, across enemy territory." John raised a brow. "Let me guess. You expect me to play bodyguard?" She nodded. "It's the only way. If the shard leads your possession, you'll weaken until, well, I assume you prefer staying alive." John sighed, standing up and stretching his sore muscles. "Fine. But once we get there, we're cutting this cosmic leash, understood?" Syra offered the closest thing to a smile, though it was faint and brief. "Understood." They moved quietly, sticking to the shadows as the sun dipped below the horizon. John led the way, his rifle slung across his back, while Syra walked beside him, occasionally limping but refusing his help. The shard's glow pulsed faintly, a reminder of their bond. John couldn't help but notice how the landscape shifted as they pressed on. The ruins around them felt older, the air heavier, as if they were stepping into a forgotten part of the world. Strange symbols lined the broken walls, and John swore he saw shadows moving in the corner of his vision. "You sure we're heading in the right direction?" he asked, his voice low. Syra glanced around, nodding. "Yes, this was once part of my people's domain. The land remembers us." "Comforting," John muttered, gripping his weapon a little tighter. As they continued, the faint sound of voices echoed ahead. John signaled for Syra to stay back as he crept forward, peering over a ridge. Below, a group of Dralkan soldiers had set up camp. They huddled around a fire, weapons stacked neatly beside them. John's eyes narrowed. There were 5 of them, heavily armored and alert. Fighting them head-on would be suicide. "We need to go around," he whispered, turning back to Syra. She shook her head. "We can't. Their path crosses ours. If we wait, others will find us." John frowned, glancing at the shard in his hand. He felt stronger since taking it, but testing its limits against a full squad wasn't ideal. "I can create a distraction," Zaira offered, stepping forward. "Absolutely not," John replied quickly. "The second they see you, they'll call for reinforcements." She hesitated, clearly weighing their options. "There's another way," she said quietly. "But it's dangerous." John raised an eyebrow. "More dangerous than charging into a squad of Drauken." Zaira stepped closer, lifting her hand. The shard in John's palm pulsed in response. "I can channel more of my energy into the shard, but it will alter you temporarily. You'll have the strength to face them, but the risk is high. If you lose control, I might not be able to bring you back." John considered this for a long moment. Every part of him screamed that this was a bad idea, but he was short on options. "Fine," he said at last. "Do it." Zaira nodded solemnly, pressing her hand over the shard. The moment her fingers touched it, a surge of energy coursed through John's veins. His muscles tensed, and for a brief second, his vision blurred. When it cleared, the world felt sharper. John flexed his fingers, feeling raw power flowing through him. "I feel like I could tear through steel," he muttered. Zaira stepped back, her eyes wary. "Don't let it consume you. This power isn't human, and it doesn't belong to you." John nodded, steeling himself as he crept down the ridge, the alien energy humming just beneath his skin. The Drauken wouldn't know what hit them. Journey through hostile lands. The night sky hung low over the desolate landscape, stars barely visible through the thick haze of war. Captain John Ryder and Queen Zaira moved quietly, their footsteps muffled by the soft, ash-covered ground. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself resisted their progress. John's grip on his rifle tightened. The shard tucked inside his jacket pulsed softly, a rhythmic thrum that felt almost like a second heartbeat. It was unnerving. His body felt stronger, faster, but there was an itch beneath his skin, a strange sensation that he couldn't shake. Zaira walked beside him in silence, her gaze scanning the horizon. The faint glow from her alien markings illuminated the path just enough to see, casting eerie shadows around them. "You're awfully quiet," John muttered, eyes flicking toward her. "There is little to say," she replied softly, not looking at him. "The hardest part is yet to come." John frowned. "Harder than sneaking through enemy territory with half the galaxy trying to kill us." Zaira stopped abruptly. "Yes." She pointed ahead. John followed her gaze and felt his stomach tighten. A sprawling canyon stretched before them, jagged cliffs rising on either side like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. Along the edges, strange structures jutted out, tall spires covered in glowing symbols similar to the ones on Zaira's skin. "What is this place?" John asked warily. Zaira's eyes darkened. "It is called the Rift. It was once sacred to my people, but now it serves as a hunting ground." "Hunting ground for what?" She hesitated. "Creatures born from war and suffering. They feed on life essence, drawn to it like moths to flame." John exhaled sharply. "You're telling me there are monsters out there that eat life force. Great, just great." Zaira stepped forward. "We must cross. There is no other way." John glanced around nervously. The canyon stretched for miles in either direction. She was right. Crossing was the only option. As they descended into the canyon, the temperature dropped noticeably. The thin mist swirled around their ankles, and faint whispers seemed to drift through the air. John glanced at Zaira. "You hearing that?" She nodded grimly. "The voices of those who fell here long ago. They are echoes, not truly alive, but dangerous nonetheless." John swallowed hard, scanning the rocky walls. His instincts screamed that something wasn't right. The deeper they went, the thicker the mist became until visibility dropped to just a few meters. Then he saw movement. At first, it was just a flicker, a shadow darting through the fog. But as they pressed on, more shapes appeared. Tall, slender figures with glowing eyes watched from the cliffs, their forms blending seamlessly into the stone. Zyra stopped, her hand raised. The Wraith. John aimed his rifle. Friendly. No, she replied. They are guardians of this place. They do not distinguish between friend or foe. If we are seen, they will attack. John gritted his teeth. Of course they will. Zyra glanced at him. The shard. It may allow you to pass unnoticed. But if you show aggression, they will sense it. John lowered his weapon reluctantly. All right. Lead the way. They walked in tense silence, the Wraith watching their every move. John kept his breathing steady, forcing himself not to react to the unsettling presence surrounding them. But just as they neared the other side of the canyon, a low growl echoed from behind. John spun around, heart pounding. A hulking figure emerged from the mist, not a Wraith, but something far worse. Its body was twisted and deformed, its eyes burning red with hunger. Zyra's eyes widened. A Forsaken. John didn't wait for an explanation. He grabbed Zyra's arm and ran. The creature lunged after them, its clawed hands scraping against the canyon walls, sending sparks flying. We can't outrun it. Zyra gasped. John skidded to a stop, turning to face the beast. The shard pulsed violently, and he could feel its energy building inside him. Get behind me, he growled. Zyra hesitated but obeyed. John held the shard tightly, feeling its warmth spread through his body. The creature charged, but as it neared, John thrust his hand forward. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the shard, slamming into the beast and sending it crashing to the ground. The creature howled, writhing in pain before dissolving into mist. John staggered, the light from the shard dimming. His breathing was ragged, and his hands trembled. Zyra stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. You are stronger than I expected. John managed a weak grin. Yeah, well, remind me not to make that a habit. As they climbed out of the canyon, the first light of dawn began to break through the haze. John glanced at Zyra, exhaustion evident in his eyes. So, what's next? He asked. Zyra gazed at the horizon. The sanctuary lies ahead, but reaching it will be the hardest part yet. John sighed. Figures. Let's keep moving. With the canyon behind them, the journey pressed on. But John knew that the bond forged between them was only growing stronger, and with it the danger that awaited on the path ahead. The sanctuary's truth. The landscape shifted as John Ryder and Queen Zyra approached the sanctuary. The barren, war-torn plains gradually gave way to an unnatural stillness. Towering, crystalline spires rose in the distance, their surfaces shimmering under the rising sun. The air felt heavier here, as if time itself slowed down the closer they came. John's boots crunched softly against the smooth stone path leading toward the heart of the sanctuary. He could feel the shard pulsing faintly beneath his jacket, in sync with his heartbeat. Every step seemed to amplify the sensation, as if the very ground responded to the shard's presence. Zyra walked silently beside him, her violet eyes fixed on the path ahead. There was a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before, a quiet unease that John couldn't ignore. All right, John finally said, breaking the silence. We're almost there. Mind telling me why this place feels like it's watching me? Zyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Because it is. John stopped, narrowing his eyes. Come again. Zyra sighed softly. The sanctuary is alive, in a sense. It is connected to my people, to our essence. When you accepted the shard, you became part of that connection. John raised a brow. Great, so now I'm bonded to an alien sanctuary. What's next? Glowing tattoos. Zyra didn't smile. It's more complicated than that, John. The path curved ahead, leading to a large, circular courtyard. In the center stood a towering structure, an obelisk of swirling light and crystal, humming with energy. At its base, a group of figures waited. John instinctively tensed, his hand drifting toward his rifle. The figures were tall and slender, their bodies draped in flowing robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed faintly, and each bore the same intricate markings that adorned Zaira's skin. "They're Velara," Zaira said quietly. "The council." John exhaled slowly. "I'm guessing they're not the welcoming committee." "They will not harm you," Zaira assured him. "But they will have questions, and they may not like the answers." "Fantastic," John muttered. "Let's get this over with." As they stepped into the courtyard, the council members turned toward them in unison, their glowing eyes locking onto John. The sensation was immediate, a weight pressing down on him, as if unseen hands probed his mind. One of the council stepped forward, his gaze fixed firmly on Zaira. "Zaira Ilvarn, Exa, you were not expected to return." Zaira bowed slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I had no choice. I was ambushed. This human saved me." The council member's gaze shifted to John, his expression unreadable. "You carry the shard." John nodded. "Yeah, seems that comes with the territory." The councilman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you understand what you have done?" John shrugged. "Saved your queen, I'm guessing." "You're welcome, by the way." The other council members exchanged brief glances, their expressions tightening. Zaira stepped forward. "He acted without knowing the consequences. I will explain." Before she could continue, the obelisk behind them flared brighter, and John felt a sharp tug in his chest. The shard pulsed violently, as if resonating with the obelisk's energy. John staggered back, clutching his chest. What's happening?" Zaira's eyes widened in alarm. "The shard is responding to the sanctuary. It recognizes you." The councilman's gaze hardened. "Because he carries more than just the shard." Zaira froze, realization dawning on her face. "You mean?" John groaned, the weight pressing heavier now. "Someone want to clue me in." The councilman stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "The shard is not just a fragment of Zaira's essence. It holds a piece of our ancestral power, a power that should only reside within the Velara. By carrying it, you are no longer purely human." John's eyes widened. "Hold on. You're saying this thing is changing me?" Zaira lowered her gaze. "I suspected as much, but I didn't know it would happen this quickly." John took a step back, running a hand over his face. "Let me get this straight. I saved you, and now I'm slowly turning into one of you." The councilman's expression softened slightly. "Not exactly. The shard is adapting to your body, but the bond between you and Zaira is growing stronger. If she is harmed, that bond will tear you apart." John exhaled sharply. "Of course it will. Because why wouldn't it?" Zaira stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean for this to happen." John shook his head. "It's fine. I just need to know how to fix this. There's a way to cut this bond, right?" The councilman hesitated. "Perhaps, but doing so could harm Zaira. And there is another problem." John sighed. "Naturally. Let's hear it." "The shard has already drawn attention," the councilman said grimly. "Our enemies can sense its power. They will come for it, and for you." John's jaw tightened. "So, what? I'm a walking beacon for alien assassins now." Zaira met his gaze, determination flickering in her eyes. "You won't face them alone. I will stand by you until the bond is severed." John studied her for a long moment, then exhaled, shaking his head with a faint smile. "You really know how to make life interesting." Zaira's expression softened. "It's the least I can do." John nodded toward the council. "All right. What's the next step?" The councilman glanced toward the obelisk. "We prepare, and you must decide whether to embrace the shard's power or destroy it." John stared at the swirling obelisk, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: there was no turning back now. Betrayal and revelation. The air inside the sanctuary felt colder than the outside. John Ryder could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes, even though the council chamber was almost empty. The crystalline walls hummed softly, reflecting fragments of light that twisted and stretched as if alive. Zyra walked a step ahead, her gaze fixed forward. She hadn't spoken much since the council revealed the truth about the shard. John could see the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of doubt in her expression. Something wasn't right. "You're awfully quiet," John muttered, breaking the silence. His voice echoed faintly, bouncing around the chamber. Didn't stop. "There is much to consider." John frowned. "Like the fact that I'm carrying an alien relic that's slowly rewriting my DNA." She hesitated for a brief second, then continued walking. "Yes, and more." That answer didn't sit well with him. They entered a long corridor lined with ancient statues, their faces worn smooth by time. John glanced around uneasily. "So, what exactly is this place? Some kind of temple?" Zyra nodded slightly. "It is more than that. This sanctuary was once the heart of our civilization. Every ruler of my lineage stood here to receive the blessings of the elders." John raised an eyebrow. "Blessings, huh? Feels more like a crypt." Zyra's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. They reached the end of the corridor, where a large set of ornate double doors loomed. Zyra placed her hand against the smooth surface, and the doors slid open with a low, resonating hum. The room beyond was circular, with a raised platform in the center. Above it, suspended by invisible forces, floated a large crystal almost identical to the shard John carried. Its light bathed the chamber in a soft glow. John whistled softly. "Well, that's new." Sarah stepped toward the platform, but before she could reach it, a voice echoed through the chamber. "You should not have brought him here, Zyra." John spun around, raising his rifle instinctively. From the shadows emerged 3 Velara council members, their glowing eyes fixed on John like predators stalking prey. Zyra stiffened. "He saved my life. He has the right to be here." One of the councilmen stepped forward. "You know the laws. A human cannot be allowed to bond with the shard. The consequences are unpredictable." John narrowed his eyes. "I'm standing right here, you know. If you got something to say it to me." The councilman's gaze shifted to him. "The shard is not a gift, human. It was never meant to be carried by one of your kind." John crossed his arms. "Yeah, I got that part. But seeing as it's already inside me, maybe you should focus on fixing the problem instead of pointing fingers." Sarah moved between them. "We will find a way to sever the bond. But he is not to be harmed." The council members exchanged glances. Then the lead councilman spoke, his voice colder this time. "You are not in a position to make demands." John's grip tightened on his weapon. "All right, I'm getting tired of the cryptic threats. If you got something to say, let's hear it." The councilman's eyes narrowed. "The shard's power cannot be allowed to spread beyond this sanctuary. If severing the bond risks harming our queen, then we will remove the source directly." John's blood ran cold. "You're talking about killing me." Zyra's eyes flashed with anger. "You cannot do this." The councilman's expression remained calm. "It is for the survival of our people." John stepped back, his hand instinctively resting on the shard beneath his jacket. The faint warmth pulsed stronger, as if responding to the threat. "I've faced worse," John muttered. "But if you think I'm going to let you end me without a fight, you're dead wrong." Zyra turned to him, her voice low. "John, we can leave. Now." The lead councilman raised his hand, and the crystal above them flared brighter. Suddenly, John felt his knees weaken, his vision blurring as the shard burned hot against his chest. Zyra's eyes widened. "Stop this." John fell to one knee, gripping his chest as the shard's light pulsed violently. The councilman's voice echoed in his ears. "The bond cannot be broken without sacrifice. He is already becoming something else. If we delay, it will be too late." Through the haze, John caught Sarah's expression. a mix of fury and desperation. Then, without warning, Zyra extended her hand. A wave of energy burst forth, sending the council members stumbling backward. John gasped as the pressure lifted, and he staggered to his feet. "Appreciate the save," he rasped. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. "We need to go. Now." As they fled the chamber, the council's voices followed them. "This is treason, Zyra." Zyra's grip tightened. "You saved my life, John. Now it's my turn to save yours." John glanced at her as they sprinted down the corridor. So much for peaceful negotiations. Zyra didn't smile this time. "They won't stop until the shard is destroyed, or you are." John exhaled sharply, already hearing footsteps echoing behind them. "Guess that means we're on the run." Zyra nodded. "Yes, and the war for the shard has just begun." Showdown. The cold wind whipped across John Ryder's face as he and Sarah sprinted through the outer corridors of the sanctuary, their footsteps echoing off the crystalline walls. Behind them, alarms blared. A deep, vibrating hum that resonated through the stone like the heartbeat of the ancient structure itself. John glanced back, rifle in hand. He could already see shadows moving in the distance, council guards in sleek armor, their weapons glowing with the same eerie energy as the sanctuary's core. "They're gaining on us," John muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "How far is the exit?" Zyra didn't slow down. "Not far, but leaving won't stop them." John grit his teeth. "Yeah, I figured. They're not really the let-it-go type." A sudden pulse from the shard beneath his jacket made him stumble. It felt like fire spreading through his veins, his muscles tightening involuntarily. John groaned, leaning against the wall for support. Zyra's eyes flashed with concern. "John, the shard. It's reacting to their energy." John's breathing was ragged as he pulled himself upright. "Great, so not only am I the main target, but now this thing is trying to fry me from the inside." Sarah stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "It won't let you die, but it may change you if we're not careful." John shook his head, forcing himself to move forward. "I'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to get out of here in one piece." As they reached the main corridor leading to the sanctuary's entrance, a group of guards emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. The lead guard raised his weapon, the tip glowing with crackling blue energy. "Stand down, human." The guard's voice echoed through his helmet, cold and distant. "You are in possession of sacred Velara essence. Surrender the shard, and you will be treated fairly." John smirked, raising his rifle. "Yeah, that sounds super convincing. Especially after you tried to vaporize me 5 minutes ago." Zyra stepped forward, placing herself between John and the guards. "I won't allow this. The bond is complete. If you harm him, you risk harming me as well." The lead guard hesitated, glancing toward his comrades. John whispered to Zyra, "I'm guessing that's not going to hold them off for long." Zyra's expression tightened. "No, it won't." One of the guards stepped forward, his weapon humming louder. "You defy the council, Zyra. This is treason." John could see the tension in Zyra's posture, but she didn't flinch. "I protect what is mine," she replied coldly. Before the guards could react, John felt the shard flare again, this time stronger, like a surge of adrenaline pouring directly into his bloodstream. His vision sharpened, every detail around him suddenly clearer. The guards took another step forward. John acted on instinct. Raising his rifle, he fired a shot into the ceiling, shattering a section of the crystalline structure above them. The collapse sent jagged shards crashing down, forcing the guards to scatter. "Move," John barked, grabbing Zyra's arm and pulling her toward the entrance. They sprinted down the corridor, weaving between the flickering lights and crumbling debris. The guards recovered quickly, chasing after them with renewed determination. John slid behind a pillar, firing suppressive shots to slow them down. "We're running out of time here." Zyra pressed her hand against a nearby panel, activating the sanctuary's outer gate. The large, circular door began to slide open with a deep, rumbling groan. But before they could reach it, another figure emerged from the far side of the corridor. It wasn't a guard. The councilman from earlier, the one who had insisted John's bond to the shard must be severed, stood in their path. His gaze was fixed on John, glowing faintly beneath his hood. "You've gone far enough," the councilman said, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. "The shard belongs to us. It cannot leave this sanctuary." John leveled his rifle at him. "I don't care who it belongs to. I'm not dying today." The councilman raised his hand, and the air around him shimmered. From the crystalline walls, long, jagged spikes extended outward, forming a barrier that cut off their escape. Zaira stepped forward, her eyes burning with anger. "Let us pass, Erind. This isn't your fight." The councilman, Erind, shook his head. "It became my fight the moment he bonded with our lifeblood. You know what that shard will do to him if left unchecked." John felt the shard's pulse intensify, each throb echoing louder in his chest. "I'm standing right here. Maybe let me decide what's best for me." Erin's gaze darkened. "You misunderstand, human. The shard will consume you. You will cease to be who you are, and something else will take your place." John's grip on his weapon faltered slightly. "And what exactly will I turn into?" Erin's expression was grim. "A vessel, a conduit for the Velara's lost power." John glanced at Zaira. "Is that true?" Zaira hesitated for a fraction of a second. "It is possible." John exhaled sharply. "Of course it is." Erin's voice softened. "Let me end this now, before it's too late." John tightened his grip, shaking his head. "Not happening." Before Erin could respond, Zaira stepped closer to John, placing both hands over his. "Trust me," she whispered. The shard flared, and in an instant, a blinding wave of energy erupted from their combined hands, shattering the crystalline spikes blocking their path. Erin shielded his eyes, but by the time the light faded, John and Zaira were gone, disappearing beyond the sanctuary gates, leaving only the fading echoes of their footsteps behind. The shocking request. The world outside the sanctuary was eerily silent. Jagged mountains stretched into the horizon, their peaks glowing faintly under the twilight sky. John Ryder stood at the edge of a steep cliff, staring down at the barren landscape below. The wind howled around him, but his focus remained on the shard pulsing faintly in his palm. Behind him, Queen Zaira approached, her steps soft against the rocky ground. The faint luminescence of her markings flickered in the dim light, casting long shadows that danced along the cliffside. John exhaled slowly. "So, we made it out. For now." Zaira stopped beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "For now," she echoed softly. John turned toward her, narrowing his eyes. "All right, Zaira. We've been running for hours. Time to level with me. What happens next?" Zaira hesitated, her hands clasped behind her back. The wind lifted strands of her silver hair, but her expression remained unreadable. "The council won't stop hunting us," she said quietly. "Not until the shard is returned or destroyed." John frowned. "Yeah, I gathered that part. What I don't understand is why. If this shard's so dangerous, why not just let me smash it right now and be done with it?" Zaira's gaze dropped to the ground. "It's not that simple." John's eyes narrowed. "I'm getting real tired of hearing that." She finally looked at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "The shard isn't just a relic, John. It's part of me, part of my soul." John stiffened. "Come again." Zaira stepped closer, placing her hand gently over his chest, directly above the shard. "The Velara do not simply craft objects of power. We are our power. The shard you carry holds a fragment of my essence, my life force. If it is destroyed, a part of me will die with it." John's breath caught in his throat. "You could have mentioned that earlier." Zaira lowered her gaze. "I didn't expect us to survive this far." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. John stared at the shard, its light pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The weight of it felt heavier now, as if he were holding far more than just a piece of alien technology. "So, what are you asking me to do?" John finally asked, his voice quieter. Zaira met his gaze. "Keep it." John blinked. "Keep it?" "Zaira, you just said this thing is a magnet for every alien assassin within 10 light years. Why in the world would I want to hold on to it?" She stepped even closer, the wind catching her voice as she spoke. "Because if you destroy the shard, the bond between us will break. I will lose part of myself. But if you keep it, that bond will remain." John shifted uncomfortably, glancing away. "And what exactly does that mean for me?" Zaira's expression softened. "It means you will carry more than just power, John. You'll carry part of who I am. And in return, you'll gain abilities no human has ever possessed." John rubbed the back of his neck, unsure whether to laugh or curse. "So let me get this straight. I get to keep running for my life. But now I've got alien superpowers and a psychic link to you." Zaira smiled faintly. "I wouldn't call it psychic. More like connected. Your strength will grow, and I will be able to find you, no matter where you are." John exhaled slowly, weighing her words carefully. "And if I say no?" Zaira's smile faded. "Then I take the shard back, and the council will stop at nothing to destroy me." John's fingers closed around the shard, feeling its warmth against his skin. He glanced at Zaira, seeing the quiet determination in her eyes. She wasn't just asking him to protect her. She was asking him to trust her. Finally, John sighed. "Guess I don't have much of a choice." Zaira's gaze softened. "You do. But I'm glad you chose this path." As the sun dipped below the horizon, John felt the shard's light flare brighter for just a moment, like a second heartbeat merging with his own. Whatever lay ahead, he knew their journey wasn't over. The war wasn't finished. The council would come for them. But for now, standing at the edge of the world with the Queen by his side, John felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope.